Like, I just remember thinking, there's no way that I can possibly do this.
Hello and welcome to the Grit Unfiltered podcast. I'm Lauren Listowskis, cancer survivor, caregiver, and advocate. If you didn't know, November is Family Caregiver Month. Today, I'm joined by another caregiver, Kathy Wilson, who does double duty as a mother and caregiver to two of her children living with type 1 diabetes. Kathy, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm excited to talk with you and get into some of the aspects of being a family caregiver.
Thanks for having me, Lauren. I am
Yeah,
excited to share.
absolutely. So we will waste no time. We'll jump right in. So my first question for you is, can you share a little bit about your family's experience with type 1 diabetes?
So we had pretty much zero experience with it until my oldest was diagnosed. And he was diagnosed about a month after he turned two. It was over Labor Day weekend. And they said we were really, really fortunate and blessed because had we waited until Monday, we ended up going, I called the pediatrician on like a on-call emergency call on Friday afternoon, evening. And so he took us in Saturday morning and sent us up to the hospital right from there. And they said, had we waited until after the holiday, we would have most likely had a different outcome. There could have been seizures, DKA, which is diabetic ketoacidosis, all kinds of things. Whereas because we went in on Saturday, my son was alert, talking. The hospital actually didn't believe that that was the diagnosis because he was so young age. And then that was in 2013. And then in 2019, my third child was diagnosed. It's weird. I kind of always thought that she was going to have it for some reason. I just had this weird feeling. But then when it happened, it still hits you like a ton of bricks. There's still a lot of disbelief and like just why is this happening again? So, but again, I mean, with hers, it was still very, very, very early. So we didn't have any complications. That was such a blessing that we had this awful diagnosis, but she didn't have to suffer. I mean, yeah, there is some suffering, but it's not as bad as it could have been.
Right. And tell me again, how old were each of your children when they were diagnosed?
So my first one, it was a month after he turned two, and the second one was diagnosed on her third birthday.
What a birthday gift.
I mean, the hospital did amazing. They brought her balloons and presents, and the cafeteria made a special little birthday cake for her. So they did a great job. Nobody wants to spend their birthday in the hospital, but they really did a good job helping her through it.
Well, that's good. That's definitely a plus for that.
And then we were still able to have her birthday party that weekend, so
Hey,
it
there
was
you
all
go.
fine.
It's a win.
Yeah,
You got to take the little wins, I guess.
you do.
Um, and just wondering a little bit more, when you did get your first child's diagnosis, what were you kind of feeling in that moment?
There was a lot of fear, um, overwhelming, I mean, just sadness, uncertainty. I remember we had gone into the back room of the pediatrician's office and he had done a blood draw. And then he said, I'm going to put these in the thing. I need a urine sample. Can you help him? So I went around the corner to the bathroom with my son. And when we came back out, I just saw the look on our doctor's face and I knew that it was going to be bad. And so that was when he said, he sat us down and he said, you're going to go up to the hospital. Maybe you have time to go home and pack some things. You're going to be there for a couple days. And it was all very surreal. We called my parents and they met us so that they could we had a 6-month-old at the time. So they met us so that they could help with him. And then we went up to the hospital and the whole weekend you have moments of very vivid, like I remember the smells and the sounds and the
Yep.
nurses. And I also have where everything's kind of a blur. And I do remember coming home, going through the parking garage to get to our car. I remember thinking, how can they do this? How can they let me go home? I have no training, I have no medical knowledge, and they expect me to give my child medicine and calculate things accurately and give shots. Like, I just remember thinking, there's no way that I can possibly do this.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure it was incredibly scary and overwhelming and just
Mhm.
really scary when it was time to go home, and out of the care of the hospital and the providers and, it kind of essentially falling on you, right, to take care of your
Right.
child in this new way that no one prepared you for. So, and how old are your children now?
So my oldest is 13. And then I have an 11-year-old, and then the other type one is 8. She'll be 9 in about a month and a half. And then I have a 7-year-old.
Okay. So we're looking at, up and coming teenager
Yeah.
and also an almost 9-year-old. So, at the start and then, even now as they've grown up, how would you say your children have adapted to their diagnosis and what were some of the hardest parts of helping them understand and manage their condition?
Overall, I think that they adapted pretty well. They were so young when they were diagnosed, they really don't remember not having it and not having to do these things. The hardest part was definitely the shots. And then um, with my second, because we had already done the continuous glucose monitor with my first and an insulin pump with my first, they immediately let us try to get on it with my second. And so the glucose monitor changes, those are hard. It's a pretty intense, I mean, it's just one poke every 10 days, but it's a pretty intense poke. And she still struggles with shots if there's, her insulin pump's not working, so she has to take a shot. It's still a big thing. If dad's around, dad helps. Just calm her. He's really good about his presence calms her.
Right.
And if he's there, she's pretty good with it. But if it's just me, there's holding down, unfortunately, which makes you feel like such a terrible mom because your kid is crying and screaming. We just had a blood draw a month ago at her doctor's office, a regular yearly blood draw. And there was screaming and saying, "Don't touch me, don't do this to me, this hurts." And you just feel like such a terrible person, and you want to take the pain from them, and you want to make this all go away, but you can't. And so it's really hard to see them struggling with it. My oldest, he didn't have quite as hard a time. He adjusted pretty quickly to the shots, and this is just what we do. But like I said, my younger one, she's going on almost 6 years of having it, and it is still, sometimes just really, really hard to understand that this is something I have to do, and this is something that has to be done for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that's just a really hard concept to try and understand, as a child and growing up that I know you don't want to do this and I'm here, this is helping you. I know in this moment you feel like I'm hurting you or this is hurtful and you don't want to do it, but it's really essential. And I think, that can be a really hard conversation and thing to kind of express and balance as the primary caregiver and mom.
Right. And that's so this last time where we had the almost panic about the blood draw, we tried to talk through all of it, step by step of what we were doing. The phlebotomist was really patient and, tried to show her everything and let her see, how it would feel, what she could do, different numbing things. And there was just no reasoning with her. And so we finally just said, okay, we have to do this. And then when we got home, she told me that one of her biggest fears was because she didn't recognize the phlebotomist. It wasn't our usual person. And so she didn't know. And so there's also that aspect of teaching them that yes, this is something that's required. You do have to have it, but you also can speak up for yourself. And I told her, I said, next time, don't be afraid to ask and say, hey, I haven't met you before. How long have you been doing this? Have you done it with a lot of other children? And I, told her you can ask these questions and they'll be more than happy to answer them. And so speak up for yourself. It's okay to say, I don't know you. I'm scared of you. What's your qualifications? You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
things like that. So it's a balance of trying to tell them these are things that have to be done, but also here's how you can speak up for yourself and kind of ease those fears and hopefully get answers to questions that you have ahead of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, good on her for, maybe when you got home or later that day or that week, she finally kind of explained what it was about this particular blood draw and being able to say, I didn't know that person, and then you as a mom and being in that caregiver position, helping equip your children to, even as young as they are, to start being advocates for themselves and know that they can ask questions about their body and, be in that place of there are things you can control and there are things you can do to help make yourself feel better through all of this and stand up for yourself. So, um, kudos to you. I mean, I work with different kinds of patients and families all the time, and helping people become their own best advocate is challenging, and I'm sure even more so, in a mother-child dynamic. So that's impressive. Good for you.
I mean, it's hard. You don't want to see them go through it, so you try to help them everywhere you can.
Right.
I probably wouldn't do it for myself, but it's different when it's your kid. You can feels
Oh
like you
yeah.
can speak up more.
Yeah, definitely. So, I think we kind of know, most people might know that type 1 diabetes affects, really every part of daily living. How has managing it impacted the daily routines and activities, of your entire family? Your kids with type 1, without, family dynamic, you as a mom.
There's so much more that goes into it than people that don't have chronic condition. They don't realize every little decision changes almost, and it affects like the sibling dynamic, because if the ones that have type 1 are having an off day, if their blood sugar is low, if their blood sugar is high, it completely changes the way their ability to control their emotions, that they can't regulate emotions as well. It affects their ability to concentrate. It affects their ability just to be their, I don't want to say normal self, but kind of, it
Hmm.
changes how they react and respond to things. And so you could be having a bad day and the other siblings are like, well, why is he mad at me today? Well, it's not that he's mad at you, just blood sugar's off. And sometimes we might have more cuddle time because they just don't feel good. Something is not sitting right in their bodies. It affects, like right now, we have snow on the ground. And so they want to go outside and play in the snow. But you have to stop and think, okay, what's your blood sugar at? How long are you going to be outside? Maybe you should take some sugar out just in case. Then you have to do check-ins every 15 minutes because when it's cold outside, my kids' blood sugar tends to drop really quickly. And I mean, then there's other things where stress will make one kid go up and the other kid go down. So you're constantly trying to see, okay, what kind of situation are we going into? What kind of activity are we going into? Do we have enough snacks to cover this? Do we have enough lows to cover it? Insulin, or do we have extra pods? You're always having to think, do we have everything that we possibly might need? And it's just, yeah, every little activity you're having to think, do we have enough to cover it? And how is it going to affect their emotions and their regulation?
Right. And then, like you mentioned, if, the whole family's together, if they're having trouble or if they're having a difficult day, it then, impacts your other two children and how they're feeling. And, if they're trying to, live their best life and be engaged in an activity or doing something, and then, the whole family kind of has to take a pause or a time out, for these little breaks and for management of this, Definitely a lot. Definitely sounds like more than an average family routine dynamic of, hey, I'm gonna grab my backpack, throw the kids some snacks and a coloring book, and hit the road and go do whatever. It sounds
Right,
like there's a lot more involved than just, I guess you could say, average or normal families.
right. And then, I mean, I feel everybody has their things, but like we went camping in a fire lookout, and so it's kind of remote. You're up at the top of a mountain, and it would take a little bit to get off the mountain. So, even something like that, you're having to think, all of the things that you pack on a normal basis, but all of the additional things that you need to pack and the backup things. We went to Florida with a bunch of family members in the spring, and I always overpack my supplies because you never know. And I actually ran out of supplies for the first time ever because we didn't realize, and we still don't know for sure. We can only theorize what happened, but we kept having our insulin pods fail within 24 hours of putting them on.
Mm,
We think it had something to do a mixture of the sunscreen and the salt water in the pool, but I thought that I had enough. I thought that I had double what I needed, but I didn't because we had all these pods fail. So then we actually have to stop, take a break from doing anything on vacation because now I have to figure out with our doctor who is, 1,500 miles away. I need to get an emergency prescription so that I can get the supplies needed so that we can continue on with our vacation.
wow. Yeah, and that's again, not something most families have to think of or worry about or even have that disruption, interruption during something like a family vacation. Added challenges for sure. So, wondering about you as a mom and as the main caregiver, how do you balance the extra needs of your children with type 1 diabetes with the needs of your non-diabetic children?
I I don't know that I do a good job. I try.
I'm
It's a
sure you
struggle because
do.
thank you. I mean, it's a struggle because you're trying to give everybody one-on-one time and you're trying to connect with all of them, but the other two see that there is extra time spent with Lincoln and Libby because you are having to change pods, change glucose monitors, try to figure out what's going on if there's something goofy or whatever. And so you do have this extra time with them. There's more doctor's appointments, and even sometimes the doctor's appointments are a source of jealousy because that's a couple hours that mom has with one of those and not the other children. And so then you try to, okay, even if it's just 5 minutes of cuddling on the couch, let me read a story to you, or let's look at something, let's talk about, my second is really into history, so okay, let's talk about what you're reading, tell me the story, because he loves historical fiction. But you try to find little moments where you can connect with them and have this extra time and still balance everything. And it might only be 5 minutes with the non-diabetic as opposed to an hour with the diabetic. But it's also hard because you don't want it just to be the one-on-one time only diabetes stuff. So
Yes.
yeah, it
Right.
is it is a constant struggle to
Yeah.
balance it and control it without
Right. Because
completely making your life about it. And
right. Yeah, make some things normal and a normal, parent child relationship as well. I know, growing up it was always my parents, everything's equal, everything's equal, everything's the same, and I'm sure that just, I mean, you can try as hard as you can and as you want to as a parent, but that's definitely not always going to be the case because of the intensive care and additional needs that are there. So, you touched a little bit on the sibling dynamic, and I was wondering if there was any more you could share about any similarities or differences you see between your two diabetic children versus your non-diabetic, and the two that do live with the same condition. Do they help each other out or help cope and go through things together?
they do. More so, the support comes from my oldest. to my younger one. He did seem to have the easier time with the adjustment, and he's really stepped in to help his little sister. There's times that if he knows he has a pump change and she does too, he'll wait so that they can do it together. He'll put it on the same part of his body as she does, and then they'll be like, "Look, we're twins," and show it off. He holds her hand. When we were having that blood draw last month, he was talking to her, reminding her that, it's really quick, it's painless, it's not that bad. So he was trying to calm her down and remind her what's all involved. So he is a really good support for her. And she's learning, but it's the same kind of sibling dynamic. The younger one doesn't always support the older one. It's,
Right.
just the way it works. As far as the other ones go, they do a really good job too. They don't fully understand, but they've always shown that they want to learn. My second oldest, as soon as he was old enough, he wanted to learn how to do a glucagon shot, which is kind of like an EpiPen, but for
Hmm.
diabetics. So he practiced learning how to do that in case he, was ever needed for that. My youngest, she knows how to check blood sugar. She knows, okay, well, this is high reading, low reading. So if it's low, she'll be like, "Mommy, one of them needs sugar." So they all kind of look out for each other that way. And it's really cool to see that they love each other and they want to help take care of it and just support each other in that.
Right.
They also, a fun thing that they do is we like to paint our insulin pods. So the part that goes on their body, just because it's more fun. And
Yeah,
so we'll all sit around the table and we'll all paint pods. And it's not a fun thing to have, but it is a way that we can still, as a family, help support each other.
that's cute. I like that. That's really special. And I'm sure, now that they're young, they might not see it or appreciate it or kind of know how they're all kind of helping each other. But I'm sure definitely as they get older, there'll be more of an appreciation for each other and, even into adulthood and things like that, that it'll really make a difference that they had this common bond, and common thing that they had to encounter and, work throughout their childhood.
Yeah.
Thinking about, your children, non-diabetic and diabetic, outside of the home, with other kids and friendships and, activities outside of the house or school, what has that been like? Have you noticed any struggles or problems, or do kind of outside kids seem to be pretty open and okay with things?
So far, we haven't had a negative experience. We have had children on the playground or at sports practice or, wherever, they might ask, "What is that?" Or they'll look at it. But all of my kids are really good about explaining what it is. And sometimes it draws more questions, and sometimes the other child is just like, "Oh, okay, cool, let's go." And they continue on playing or, whatever it is they're doing. But we have not had a negative experience where someone has said, "Oh, that's so weird," or anything
Mm,
like that. It's everyone, they might ask questions, but everyone so far has been really accepting and doesn't seem to let it change the way that they feel about the person individually.
right. That's amazing. And I always say kids are children can be so brutally honest, but
Hmm.
at the end of the day, if they're spending time together, they want to do the activity or play the sport or do the thing and get to that. And I think that's what matters most is actually interacting and playing and things like that. So that's really nice to hear. How has being a caregiver to your own children with a chronic condition changed your perspective on parenting and what it means to be a mother?
So I always suspected that motherhood was hard. I actually was not planning to ever be a mom. I didn't think that I had it in me. And then we had four. And you realize how hard it is, but how much joy there is in it too. And as a mom of someone with a chronic condition, and it's hard to say this because I don't want it to seem like I'm not proud of my other children, because absolutely
Right.
1000%. So proud of them. You can see their strengths. And you're so proud of them when they learn new skills or they conquer something, they've been struggling with. But when you're a mom of someone with a chronic condition, there's so much more that you see. And it's probably because your child is forced to have to do it. They're really pushed to it, but you see how strong they are, how brave they are. And it amazes you that this little tiny person can do these things because I mean, we often think that children can be helpless, but they they show you that they really are so strong and so adaptable and able to just okay, this is what we're dealing with. And yes, we have hard days, but we're just going to keep going and we're just going to keep doing it. And they just do. They just keep going. And it's amazing to see them work through these struggles and adapt and overcome to what they have to face every single day. And it is scary. As soon as I found out I was pregnant with my first, you start thinking of all these things that you never thought of before and all the things they're going to have to face. But now that they have this condition that is lifelong, it's terrifying to think someday they're going to be out of the house. Are they going to sleep through their alarm? Are they going to wake up in the morning? Do I need to keep the follow app on my phone so that I can see their blood sugars? And then you go, no, I have to let them go, but I can't let them go. There's no way I can let them go. And so that adds a whole new thing, especially so where we live, you can get your license at 15. And so, of course, my son is like, oh, I've only got this much time left. And it's terrifying to think, how can I let this person go out on the road? I can't control it anymore. So yeah, there's definitely, I think, and maybe I'm wrong, but a more terrifying aspect to having kids with chronic conditions, knowing that someday they're going to be out of the house, or even if it's just for the day. As a teenager, you can't control it. You can't constantly monitor and make sure that they're okay.
Right.
So definitely more terrifying than I ever thought.
Yeah. And I think what you said earlier, of course, absolutely, you're proud of your other two children, but what kids can be resilient through and adapt to and learn and do for themselves so early and so quickly, I'm sure you have that feeling of, oh man, if they can do this, imagine what they're going to be able to accomplish and succeed in, as they keep growing up. I'm sure there's a balance for you, especially as you're entering, teenager years with your oldest and everything, and more freedom and things like driving. That there's definitely, kind of a struggle as a parent of letting them have the freedom, but also the control and autonomy, but in overdrive, right? Not just, a teenager and they need to pay attention to this and that. It's like, no, like my kid has all these extras. And I'm sure that can be challenging of that feeling of letting go and trusting them and letting them make their own choices. But really, it's choices that can impact their health and their life
Mm-hmm.
too, here, more so than, a non-diabetic child. So I'm sure that can be really difficult, but I mean, it sounds like you're preparing them and you've really gotten them to a place already that, you know, they can make really good choices and will continue to do so.
They do make good choices. You know, they're kids. At the end of the day, they're kids. And so sometimes the choices aren't good. Sometimes they forget what they're supposed to do. But overall, they do a really good job. And yeah, it's just, I like to control things. It's a big flaw of mine. So it's really hard to think down the road of I'm not going to be able to have my hands on it. But yeah, we're trying to prepare them the best we can to this is what's coming. This is what you're going to have to be doing, but also still letting them be a kid as much as possible and try to take the stress off of them for now
Hmm.
as it is going to be with them for the rest of their life.
Right. I think that's a really great point of, yes, you might admit you like to be in control, but at the same time, doing more and managing more and having more control does allow them to have more of, this normal childhood. Because like you
Mm-hmm.
said, they are going to have to live with this forever, so take the burden off of them now while you can, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm sure you know, as a cancer survivor, and I think I've heard you say before that your mom had cancer.
Yep. I was the primary caregiver for my mom when she had stage 4 cancer.
Right. So, I mean, it's awful. There's a burnout because there's so many decisions day in and day out, and you get to a place where you just, ugh, you don't want to do anything anymore. You don't want to have to think. And I've been there multiple times. I'm sure you've been there. And so you try as best as you can to make so that your kids don't have to get there because it'll come down the road. They're going to have their moments. So, yeah, if we can try and prevent it now,
Right.
at least it's one or two fewer that they'll
Right.
have to deal with.
And, going into that, talking a little bit about, caregiver burnout, that's a very, very real thing. Wondering, what do you do to try to kind of overcome that or do a little bit of self-care or do things to really keep up with your own well-being and your own mental health so you can show up as the best version of a mom and caregiver every day?
So we had, before we moved, we have, I have two cousins whose mom is type 1, and they really stepped in after my oldest was diagnosed, and they have been my babysitters since 2014, early 2014. And they have been so awesome. They even have taken my kids when we lived back there. They would take my kids for an entire week, 5, 6 nights, so that my husband and I could get away. And it was so refreshing to just have that time where you don't have to make all these decisions as a parent, but especially as a caregiver, to not have to make 500 daily decisions about everything. And that was huge. And it's harder now that we live farther, I mean, 2,000 miles away from them, but we still try to, maybe once a month, every other month, go out for an evening, and we can watch the kids' numbers. We can call them and let them know if there's adjustments that have to be made, but it's a little bit of getting away. It might even just be where I drop the boys off for wrestling and I grab a cup of coffee and read a book while I wait for them.
Right.
Or it might even be just at home. Last night I was quilting. I like to craft. And so I'm still at home. I'm still having to make these decisions, but having that little creative release for me helps me to kind of process it. I can work through thoughts and emotions as I'm
Right.
crafting. And so you just find these little moments. Sometimes they're huge moments, and sometimes it's just little tiny things that help you feel normal.
Yeah,
5
absolutely.
minutes that you haven't made a decision.
And, I think that's such an important thing that I always try to remind people is, self-care and mindfulness and acknowledging and working through your emotions doesn't have to be this great, grand, 6-hour, $500 spa day or, these grand gestures. It can be just sitting with yourself with a book or doing an activity like quilting that you're just with yourself, with your thoughts, with your emotions. And, in your case, like reading or quilting, it's, a positive outlet for you, and it doesn't have to be some grand, mom's weekend getaway crazy thing, because
Right.
you need to do these little pieces, in daily life, weekly life that add up that can help you sustain over time.
Yes, absolutely.
We've talked a lot about a lot of different things. Is there something you wish people knew or understood more about the reality of being a parent to children with a chronic condition?
So I know that everyone, I kind of said it before, everyone has their struggles. Parenting is hard. Life just in general can be hard, and everybody has their struggles. But I think one of the biggest things is I hear a lot of times people say that I'm overbearing. I am too uh, helicopter. I'm a helicopter parent, and I don't need to stress so much about it. we were at an amusement park, water park amusement park this summer, and we went with a friend, and there were other people that she knew that were there. And so I've got different groups of kids are running all over the place, and we had a parent with them, but they were just here and there and everywhere. And my daughter wanted to go off one way, and my son wanted to go off another way. And so I had to stop and think, okay, what are their blood sugars doing? How long are they going to be gone? How long are these rides going to take? Who's going with them? Who's going to hold their kids? And I was having a hard time processing it with all of the noise and everything happening. And the one lady kind of told me, oh, we can all take care of it. You don't need to worry about this. You just have to let them go and be kids. And I just looked at my husband and he was like, okay, stop. This is what we're going to do. But I don't think people realize I'm not trying to be a helicopter parent. There's just so many different things that go into it. And it's with anyone that has a chronic condition, you have to think of so many different things. And I promise we're not trying to be dramatic or whatever. It's just, that's just how life is. And
Yeah.
this is our life.
Yeah, I'm sure that's hard. And I mean, there already is so much, unfortunately, comparisons to parenting and parenting styles and the do's and the don'ts, what's right, what's wrong, all of that. And I mean, I'm glad your husband just kind of stepped in and said, "This is what we're gonna do." Because I think myself in that moment, I think I would have made a scene at the water park and told them
I
how I
was
really
close. I was
felt.
very close.
And I can imagine how frustrating that can be of you don't get it. This is not me not letting my kid go off on the water slide alone. This is, if things happen, things come up. This is life or death for my kid.
Right.
It's not like I want to have to be there or I want to have to always do these things and these check-ins. It's really a life or death situation possibly, and I think that's really hard for people to understand. And I always say a sense of community is so important. you know, for myself, knowing and learning and connecting with other cancer survivors or caregivers has just been so important because even like you're alluding to, if you haven't been in it and you're not doing it, you're just never going to get it. You're never going
Right.
to fully understand and be in my shoes. And I think that's where, with any condition, and especially, parenting a child with a lifelong condition like this, people really need to see and respect, a parent's wishes, because it's important. It's a safety thing, it's a health thing, it's, you know, life.
Right.
So on that note of kind of talking about community and support, or, maybe lack of support you've had in some areas, um, outside of family support, is there, anywhere you've found support, or other, moms to diabetic children, or even any kind of support or connection your children have had as well to help through this?
So I have found support on Facebook groups. And it is helpful to kind of see what everybody else is going through and how they're handling different things. Our doctors have been amazing. Both our original clinic, we were there from, 2013 to 2021, 22. And then the doctor and his staff that we have now have been phenomenal. But we also, I found just having mom friends who support you. Everybody realizes everybody's got different things going on, different ways of parenting. And we all know it's just hard trying to raise little humans that, are good and make good choices. And so I found recently, only in the last couple months, I've gotten really, really close with a lady who started coming to our church, and she's got a little girl with type 1. And it's huge because I have a lot of support with other friends, but having someone where you really don't have to say anything other than, numbers are bad today. And you both go, yeah, I totally get it. You don't have to really talk about it because you both know.
Right.
But I mean, overall, we've had a huge support system. Our family, our friends, everybody has been pretty supportive, whether it's, bringing coffee and a snack when you're in the ER, or taking them for a couple nights while we get away.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's been super supportive, and it helps to have so many people who are just there to
Right.
listen, even if it's just to listen. It's
Mm-hmm.
really, really cool.
Yeah, and I'm sure, the mom you've met more recently that also has a child with type 1 diabetes, like you said, that statement of numbers are bad. And you don't have to, over explain yourself or, start really getting into it and what it means and numbers are bad. So this is bad. This is bad. This is my other two kids are, there's
Right.
already you're coming to the table at a level of understanding already to where you
Yeah.
don't have to over explain, which can definitely burn yourself out with emotions. And then you're like, does this person even want to hear all this? Or do
Exactly.
they even like really care? So I have found, again, when you have that shared lived experience, that it is just so much maybe easier or just more peaceful, or it just feels different being able to connect and express things without having to go through the gamut of an explanation to what I like to say, like normal people, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
It's true. And you had asked about the kids' support. Their friends have all been very supportive, and like we've had a couple where with my youngest, they'll hold her hand if she's doing a pump change while they're around. My oldest, he has gone to a camp for diabetics. That was a couple years ago, and he really enjoyed it, where uh, everybody was doing the same things. Everybody had to check, everybody was getting low treatments, everybody was having to get out of the pool for 15 minutes and wait. And it was really nice for him to see that other people have it and to not feel different. We do have a camp that's close to us now. Our schedules just haven't lined up, but I would like both of them to go because I think it is a good experience for them to have. We don't want type 1 to define their life, but we also want them to see that there's other kids, and this is a struggle that a lot of people have, and you can still live a normal life with it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that I remember that's something you touched on when we had first met and got to know each other, was that even at such a young age, your son kind of realized that about himself and about, type 1 diabetes and being around other children, that, you know, I don't necessarily want to be put into that box all the time. I'm so much more than my diagnosis, my condition, my diabetes. And I think that is so important with any disease of any type for any person, that you are always so much more than just that diagnosis. And even him realizing that at a young age is, I mean, remarkable and just so good on him. And so we've covered a lot. Um, I think people are going to really be able to relate to this. And if they can't, hopefully they're able to understand what it's like to be a parent and family caregiver, and hopefully see a little glimpse into your life and what that life is like. But before we finish up, I wanted to ask if you could give one piece of advice to other parents who find themselves as caregivers for their children, what would it be?
I would say just one day at a time. Um, Sometimes it's so hard and you don't think that you're going to make it through and you feel like you're never going to hit a normal. But if you just take it one day at a time, you can stack those days, and they get better. It sometimes gets easier, and then you might go through a spurt where it's awful again. But just little by little, take your wins, focus on those, Don't focus on what you have to do now in a negative way. Don't focus on the things that you feel you're missing out on. Look at what you're still doing. Look at how good things still are, and just little tiny moments, I think.
Right. That's wonderful advice because all those little wins and those little positives, they do add up,
Mm-hmm.
and they matter. And I think trying your best to have, not some super happy-go-lucky, life is great, rainbows, positivity, but if you approach things in a more positive way or optimistic way, or even not necessarily overly positive, but just not in a negative way,
Yeah.
I think can really make a difference and just set your day up and set you up and the tasks ahead and your children and everything. Just set the day up for better success, and like you said, even if something's bad, don't dwell on it and don't just always think of that. I think it's little, but it's practical. It's something people can do in their daily life for sure.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it
Absolutely.
applies all across the board.
Right. No, no chronic condition, no caregiving, no, healthy people, sick people,
Right.
everybody, right? Well, thank you so much. This has been great, just getting to know you and hear more and hear a little bit about what it's like to be a family caregiver. So I want to thank you again for your time and for just being open and sharing yourself and your family and your children's story with us. So thank you again, Kathy. It has been great. And I wish you guys all the best. It sounds like I can already tell you're doing such a great job. So I know we have a little
Great.
visitor there. So she's like, time to wrap it up. Let's go. So thank
Thank you
you
for having
again.
me, Lauren. I appreciate it.
Thank you.